This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The Chinese president announces ambitious climate goals at a global summit that marks 5 years since the Paris Agreement. Parents cry for greater intervention after gunmen in Nigeria kidnap school children. And the US prepares to begin COVID-19 vaccinations on Monday. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's have a look at the stories coming up this hour. D-Day for Brexit negotiations as trade deal hangs in the balance. In sport, we'll take a look at some of the events that have been struck out of the 2020 events calendar. We begin with the latest from the Climate Ambition Summit. China has announced new plans for cutting its carbon emissions at the virtual event, which marks 5 years since the signing of the Paris Climate Accord. Victor Ning has more.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
It was a landmark moment. By the latest follow-up meeting at the end of last year in Madrid, though, the Paris Climate Accord looked to be in trouble.
And find it very frustrating that at the end of the day, we were not able to arrive at a final agreement.
12 months on, world leaders are looking to find new momentum. President Xi Jinping laid out China's further commitments to tackling climate change by 2030. He said China will lower its carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP by over 65% from the 2005 level. China will increase the share of non-fossil fuels in primary energy consumption to around 25%. The country also wants to increase the forest stock volume by 6 billion cubic meters from the 2005 level and bring its total installed capacity of wind and solar power to over 1.2 billion kilowatts. The COP26 climate gathering has been delayed by a year because of the pandemic, but its UK hosts held the virtual Climate Ambition Summit anyway, like China and the European Union upping some of their own climate goals and urging those who haven't yet to follow suit.
Together, we can reduce our emissions, we can radically cut our dependence on fossil fuels, we can change our agricultural practices, and in short, we can reverse the process by which, for centuries, humanity has been quilting our planet in a toxic tea cozy of greenhouse gases.
Those without new plans were excluded from the meeting, including the United States, though President-elect Joe Biden has said he will bring Washington back in. To that, French President Emmanuel Macron told the meeting,
"Welcome back, welcome home."
Between now and the next meeting, said UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, lay a huge opportunity.
The trillions of dollars needed for COVID recovery is money that we are borrowing from future generations. And this is a moral test. We cannot use these resources to lock in policies that burden future generations with a mountain of debt on a broken planet.
Global carbon emissions have fallen this year, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a drop in the ocean. Delayed action now, say leaders, will just mean more is needed later on. Victor Ning, CGTN.
In Nigeria, police and the military are still working to determine how many students were kidnapped or missing from a secondary school in the state of Katsina. This is after gunmen raided the government science secondary school on Friday. One parent and a school employee reportedly say there could be about 400 missing out of the 800 students. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has condemned the incident, which has brought back memories of a similar incident in Chibok in Borno State in 2014.
Parents of students at Government Science Secondary School in Katsina State in Nigeria are in shock.
Sincerely speaking, we here in Katsina State are in a terrifying condition. We don't see the value of the government. In fact, I have a younger brother and a child taken along by the kidnappers. I am from Danja, Katsina State, and have been in this school since dawn, and yet there is no update.
A child is a child regardless of his parent. Children were kidnapped and we didn't sleep throughout the night. And we were just hearing gunshots. Some of my relatives' children were also taken. I have been in this school since dawn.
In a statement, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari said the military had located and exchanged fire with the gang that kidnapped school students. But residents are calling for stronger intervention from the government. The state of Katsina, home to President Buhari, has been plagued by violence. The government attributes it to gangs of outlaws who attack locals and kidnap for ransom. The kidnapping has brought back memories of what happened back in 2014. Boko Haram militant group kidnapped over 200 girls from a school in Chibok. Dozens were rescued or managed to escape, but some are yet to return home. Chamuhono, CGTN.
Let's get more now on this. We have on the phone Sadiq Bindawa, a reporter at Katsina Post. Sadiq, reports indicate the gunmen may have targeted boys. What more can you tell us about this, and do we know how many children are still missing?
It was a very unfortunate incident that happened at Boys Boarding School in Kankara town in Katsina State, northern part of Nigeria, where on Friday night, around 10:30 p.m., gunmen in hundreds of motorbikes carrying dangerous ammunition attacked the school and shot the police officer guarding the school, and also abducted large number of students. Even though up to this moment there is no exact figure of the abducted students, but from the relevant authorities. But the statement, according to the government officials, says about 420 students have been discovered back to the school after the head count, but report has it that about 400 students were missing and are yet to reunite with their own parents.
Sadiq, have the authorities given any more updates about the efforts to rescue these kidnapped school children?
Yes, the president in particular, luckily enough, which happened to be in the state during the attack. He came, he's from Katsina State, so he came back the day before the incident happened. Yesterday, he condemned the attacks of the government and also directed the army and the police to go after the attackers to ensure that no student get harmed or missing. So as yesterday, just as I said, the relevant the police officers and security agencies are working so hard to see that those students have been rescued without harming them. But effort is being going on to see those students have been rescued.
And Sadiq, this kidnapping has rekindled memories of the abduction of the Chibok girls back in 2014. What are state authorities doing to minimize such attacks?
Well, in particular, this Ankara town, to be specific, is one of the 8 local government areas in Katsina State that have been suffered for the last 6 months for kidnapping, for ransom. But we never, the local government or the state in particular, have never witnessed such magnitude of insecurity that the incidents that happened for the students. The local government in particular is affected with insecurity. But the insecurity is for kidnapping and ransom. Most of the moment, these bandits will just come and attack the villagers, burn properties, and abduct women or children, and later on they release them after the ransom. So because people have been even saying either this is as a result of the normal bandit activities, or maybe it's a kind of a Boko Haram attack, just like what they have did for the Chibok. But up to this moment, just as I said, the security authorities are yet to ascertain the kind of attack, whether it is for the bandits as usual or for the Boko Haram.
All right, Sadiq, thank you very much for that. Sadiq Bindawa, a reporter at Katsina Post. Now, in Ethiopia, the United Nations has apologized on behalf of its staffers for breaching security checkpoints in the Tigray region. During the incident, they were shot at after authorities said they broke through 2 inspection blocks. The workers have since been released after being held in the town of Shire. Last month, a deal was signed by the UN and the Ethiopian government to facilitate the coordination of humanitarian access to the region. This is as a military confrontation ensued between the army and forces from the TPLF, forcing thousands to flee to neighboring Sudan. Our reporter Girum Chala is in Addis Ababa for us. He joins us now live for that. Girum, the UN has apologized for the breach of security checkpoints in Tigray. What's the reaction in Addis Ababa, and what's the latest from the Tigray region? Okay, I'm afraid I'm told we've lost Girum. We shall try and connect with him in a short while. To the United States, which has reported more than 230,000 new COVID-19 cases in a single day. Its total is now over 16 million, and the number of deaths is nearing 300,000. U.S. drug regulators have approved the first vaccine for emergency, with millions of doses being transported to states for the vaccinations that begin Monday. It can't come soon enough, with African Americans disproportionately affected by the coronavirus, resulting in high infection, hospitalizations, and death rates. Roy Rattenberg explains.
When COVID-19 hit the U.S. this year, it struck parts of it much harder.
We still see rates of death from COVID-19 twice as high among Black Americans, higher among Latinx Americans, and same for Native American communities.
Americans of color are health workers, they're frontline workers, they're essential workers. And yet major pharmaceuticals initially struggled to recruit some minorities into vaccine trials.
There is hesitancy that's pronounced in terms of Black or African Americans. I think it's important to be very upfront and honest and acknowledge a shameful history in our country of medical experimentation on Black and brown bodies in particular.
And those outrageous insults remain with us and are very, very much a part of our current way in which so many of us look at the world. So the Tuskegee syphilis studies in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, where Black men who had syphilis were just observed and watched, even though there were therapeutics that were available to cure or treat them, they were denied access to them using this sort of natural experiment to see what would happen if you don't treat it.
28 men died of syphilis, 100 more from syphilis-related illnesses.
That is a wound that doesn't go away, but we cannot get stuck there. 2020 is not 1930, and that's the real challenge. We've got to move forward.
And thus, events like this.
The input of African-American scientists in this process is much deeper than one might think.
Washington's top infectious disease expert in a 1-hour town hall geared toward Black Americans.
So the first thing you might want to say to my African American brothers and sisters is that the vaccine that you're going to be taking was developed by an African American woman. And that is just a fact. I mean, that is a fact.
Dr. Fauci said he understands the mistrust, which goes beyond the general population's vaccine concerns. But he's hopeful, and hoping his transparency may help. Roe Rattenberg, CGTN in Washington.
All right, so we have now reconnected with Girum Chala live in Addis Ababa. And Girum, as we reported earlier, the UN has apologized for the breach of security checkpoints in Tigray. Talk to us about the reaction in Addis Ababa, and also give us the latest from the Tigray region in terms of access to the areas that need humanitarian aid.
Peninah, as you've said, the United Nations has offered its formal apology for the Ethiopian authorities for the behavior of some of the aid workers operating in the northern part of the country. And we have heard that the authorities here have accepted that apology and urged for no repeat of the same action. This, by the way, is after last Sunday, some aid workers from the United Nations have breached at least two checkpoints. and they've been shot at on a third one, and they were later detained and also were released. The Ethiopian government after that said that this is a sovereign country, and any humanitarian activity that is going to be undertaken in this country must be governed by the rule of the land, and no entity, including the United Nations, can act on its own. The Redwan Hussein, who is the spokesperson of the state of emergency, also said that the action of the UN aid workers is unacceptable and must not be repeated in this country again. Now, on the other hand, Peninah, today, the Tigray regional state, by and large, remains to be calm. The activity of war has subsided long time ago, but the federal police said that it is still hunting for the TPLF leadership to bring them into justice. On the other hand, the first batch of international aid has arrived in Tigray regional state's capital, Mekelle, and the International Committee of Red Cross has delivered medical supplies and others to help people who are vulnerable, who are affected by the ongoing war 3 weeks ago. And this will continue according to the government, and the government is also supplying the much-needed humanitarian assistance for the people affected by this war. So far, this is what's happening, Peninah.
All right, Grum, we appreciate that update. Thank you. Grum Chala live in Addis Ababa. And this is Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up. China remembers victims of the Nanjing massacre committed by the Japanese army during World War II. And Egyptian civil servant recognized as best Arab minister.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Health unions in Tunisia have urged the government to create a national agency for the rescue of the public health sector. Tens of thousands of doctors and medical students protested against what they described as a disastrous situation. Unions called for increasing the health ministry's budget, upgrading hospital infrastructure, and paying the debts of all healthcare facilities.
Thousands of striking Tunisian medics and hospital staff staged an angry protest over the country's crumbling public health infrastructure. Protesters marched from the Faculty of Medicine in Tunis to the Health Ministry. Doctors staged a sit-in near the government palace, demanding urgent reforms of the public health system and better working conditions.
We are protesting nationwide to show that all healthcare professionals are angry because of the bad situation and the deep crisis in the whole healthcare system, from infrastructure to the backward legal tax from the 1960s, which regulate the profession, as well as the lack of means at hospitals.
According to the National Council of the Tunisian Medical Association, at least 50 doctors and 300 paramedics died from the COVID-19 after being infected while treating patients during the first as well as the second wave of the pandemic.
We can no longer work in these conditions both in private and public sectors, which are buckling under the strain of the pandemic. We are worried about the new generation of doctors who are risking their lives despite the lack of equipment. The number of deaths among medics and paramedics is on the rise, while the authorities are passive.
The government acknowledged the difficulties and promised to increase the budget of the health ministry. The country's premier also declared that the state will improve the working conditions at all health facilities and COVID-19 centers.
During this ministerial meeting, allow me to thank all the sons and daughters of Tunisia. I hope they're safe amid this dangerous health situation. We are following up on the development of the health situation and managing coronavirus while improving the conditions and the means to fight the pandemic.
The death of a young doctor in a lift accident sparked outrage among healthcare workers. Badruddin Alwi, 27, died last week after falling down an elevator shaft when the doors opened with no lift in place. His death also sparked calls for the health minister to resign. The Tunisian Association of Young Doctors has denounced the failings of the country's long-neglected healthcare system. Authorities say an independent national committee will be responsible for monitoring the reform of the health sector within a period of 1 month. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
As the developed nations rush to begin COVID-19 vaccinations, citizens of many African nations are watching from the sidelines as they wait for a vaccine rollout plan. We spoke to some of you on what you feel about what is going on. Take a listen.
I don't think the vaccine will even reach our country. We've always been ignored and left behind.
I will not take the vaccines because it will have side effects, as we've heard from the UK. I think the vaccines from China, Germany and the USA will be more efficient and avoid side effects. We'll not receive it until mid-next year. I hope the vaccine works and made available at affordable prices so that we can resume a normal life.
I will not hesitate to vaccinate because I trust the health authorities in my country. The problem is that our continent will not be given priority. I am confident that scientists in the world will find the right vaccine. They must work together for the good of humanity.
I don't think this is fair. The vaccine has become more of a commercial race rather than protecting public health. Countries that can pay will get first. I guess it's normal during any crisis. I hope, though, that Africa, with cooperation with the WHO, to make other vaccines available soon.
We can't say it's not fair. It's about excelling. Every nation has worked on its own vaccine. It's logical that they self-suffice their need first. After that, they can think about exporting. Even if Egypt was the first nation to have the vaccine, before sending it to Europe, it will get distributed here. It's a global market after all. A producer can dictate who gets what.
Think we'll need the vaccine even after 6 months. We might get a third wave with different symptoms or strain. We will need a vaccine no matter how late.
China is remembering the victims of the Nanjing massacre committed by the Japanese army during World War II. Today marks the country's National Memorial Day and the 83rd anniversary of the beginning of the atrocities. Up to 300,000 civilians and captured soldiers were murdered in the eastern Chinese city. Liu Jiaxin was at a memorial in Nanjing.
Sirens wailing throughout Nanjing, reminding people of the pain and suffering the city witnessed 83 years ago. The silver-haired participants of the ceremony are the living testimony of the war crimes committed during the War of Resistance against the Japanese aggression. This year, the number of registered survivors of the Nanjing massacre was reduced to 73.
It's been 75 years since the victory of Chinese people's war of resistance against Japanese aggression. The Japanese still have not come to the memorial hall. The Japanese need to admit the historical facts of the Nanjing massacre. I was 8 years old back then. I'm among the 2 children who survived, while the other 11 family members were killed. I miss them so much.
Also participating are 83 high school students who are trying to do their best to keep the memory of the victims alive.
It makes me feel closer to history. Our nation has been vigilant and strong, just like the poem describes. And seeing our country getting stronger gives me a sense of national pride.
Other participants include doctors who were on the front lines of the fight against COVID-19.
At that time, China was poor and weak, plagued by internal and external troubles. A Chinese citizen could not even guarantee his right to life. Now, especially after the COVID-19 outbreak, we can see that our people and our country is doing very well in a difficult situation. I think the Chinese people, united as one, can overcome all difficulties.
Today's Nanjing is a prosperous and wonderful city. This national memorial ceremony wants to tell us that only when we look back at our painful history can we cherish the peace we have today. And only when we acknowledge our past can we move on towards a better future. 刘嘉欣 CGTN 南京。
The massacre revealed humanity's worst and its best. Here's the story of John Rabe, who risked his life saving hundreds of thousands of civilians from Japanese atrocities.
He's been called the Good German of Nanjing. John Rabe, a business representative of Siemens, risked his life to save Chinese people after Japanese troops captured Nanjing on December 13, 1937. Rabe and other Europeans established an international safety zone, taking in and protecting more than 200,000 Chinese people during the massacre. His country yard alone concealed and protected over 600 people.
My mom said a lot of people arrived. They said they were fleeing. At first, people didn't know if they should let them in or not. Later, they said Rabe was practicing good deeds and opened the gate and let them live there.
Rabe stayed in Nanjing despite a call from the German embassy to leave the city 4 months earlier when the Japanese captured Shanghai in August.
It's hard for me to judge my grandfather and what kind of courage it took to stay there when the Japanese invaded Nanjing. He had diabetes and he needed insulin. He gave me the answer. He said everyone depended on him, including his colleagues and servants.
Rabe recorded the events in his diaries. When he was called back to Germany in early 1938, he had written 10 volumes. Murder, Rape, and Robbery, the diary provides evidence and details of what the Japanese troops did during the Nanjing massacre. On December 22, 1937, he wrote, "While cleaning up the zone, we find many bodies in the ponds. Civilians who have been shot, 30 in just one pond, most of them with their hands bound, some with stones tied to their necks." On December 24, 1937, he wrote, "I also went down to the morgue in the basement and had them uncover the bodies that were delivered last night. Among them, a civilian with his eyes burned out and his head totally burned, who had likewise had gasoline poured over him by Japanese soldiers." Rabe's diary was unveiled to the public by his granddaughter in 1996, more than 40 years after his death. It has become an important resource for studying the history of the massacre. His deeds became widely known across China. The country honored Rabe's humanitarian spirit and brave and righteous acts with a medal, a monument, and a museum.
Egypt's Minister of Planning and Economic Development, Hala Al-Said, has been chosen as the best Arab minister. The recognition is from the Arab Government Excellence Awards. The platform was launched by Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai, in coordination with the Arab League. Yasser Hakim takes a look at why she has received the award and the reaction in Cairo.
The first female to win the prestigious award. Hala Al-Said is Minister of Planning for less than 3 years, yet has already left a significant mark in her job.
Hala Al-Said has had an important role in the successful economic reform program of the last few years and has been one of the main architects of the economic and financial policies led by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi that have protected the Egyptian economy from the fallout of the coronavirus this year. Her positive input on the Egyptian economy is there for all to see.
The minister has also been given the mantle by Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to oversee major projects that shape the country's economic future: the Egypt 2030 vision, the Sovereign Fund of Egypt, and the country's digital transformation.
Hala Al-Said is unique in her scientific and well-planned approach to work and projects. She has the talent to form a professional team of experts around her that are creative and can implement the ideas and plans to the notch.
The award winner has also received the support of her peers.
I'm very proud of my colleague Professor Hala Said. It's an excellent choice. She's an extraordinary personality and she's an impressive minister.
But Hala Said believes her award is for the collective effort, not the personal.
This is a real appreciation for all the efforts and all the development that Egypt has passed through the past few years. It's appreciation for the political will to develop Egypt in such an unprecedented times. And of course, it's a real recognition to the role of women in Egypt and the unprecedented support that the women has from His Excellency the President.
Daughter of a minister of electricity in the 1970s and the first elected dean of economics at Cairo University, many believe that Al-Said's academic and political backgrounds have been an influence in her success. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live, coming up in business news. D-Day for Brexit negotiations as trade deal hangs in the balance. And stalemate continues in India between the government and farmers protesting against a new agricultural law.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues for taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
The last-minute trade talks between Britain and the EU are continuing ahead of the Sunday deadline. Negotiators will decide whether to carry on talks or get ready for a no-deal break. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen and UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson both say an agreement is unlikely. Britain left the EU in January, but it has stayed in a customs union during a transition period that lasts until the end of the year. The UK government says 4 Navy patrol ships will be deployed in British fishing waters in a no-deal divorce scenario. They will stop, check and impound any European fishing boats operating in Britain's exclusive economic zone. A stalemate in India continues between the government and farmers protesting against a new agricultural law. The farmers believe the law benefits big corporations at their expense, while the government says the legislation will boost the agricultural sector. Ravinda Bauer spoke to experts to understand the pros and the cons.
It is for the third week that the highways entering Delhi are blocked by agitating farmers. They are demanding revocation of 3 new farm laws implemented in September. These laws will eliminate assured procurement system at minimum support price or MSP.
Fuel costs, like it has increased. Fertilizer costs have increased. Insecticide cost has increased. Pesticide cost has increased. Everything has increased. But the mechanism by which the central government, it calculates the MSP, it is flawed. It is flawed. It has to be re-examined.
The government has repeatedly assured the farmers that the existing procurement system will not be affected by the new laws. On the contrary, the government says that the new laws will create new markets for farmers who will gain from technological advances and investments.
As a consequence of this, these companies will be able to extend their supply chain and invest across different states, making the entire process far more efficient than what it exists right now. So there's that digital side of it. Then there are there are grocery store chains which will also emerge as an outcome of this, and you will have different companies specializing in different aspects.
But why is there a trust deficit among the farmers?
The demand has collapsed in the economy, and that has affected the agricultural commodities as well. So that has led to decline in the price realization. So crop prices have come down quite substantially, whereas the input costs have gone up. So they've actually been losing. So the losses have gone up rather than incomes going up.
Economists say the farmers need government support the most in these pandemic times.
In this case, what we are seeing is the government actually withdrawing from whatever little support it should give and basically telling the market to do what we're doing. But the previous experience of the market intervention is very clear that market has always been very happy driving prices down rather than helping because they don't want to incur subsidies.
Farmers are prepared to continue their protests till their demand is met. They say they have more to lose if they go back. Ravinder Baba, CGTN, Delhi.
The COVID-19 lockdown in Uganda may have helped keep the sky clear, but the country's problem with air pollution will far outlast the pandemic. Environmentalists, however, are concerned that the easing of lockdown measures will lead to an increase in pollution. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
These devices are helping scientists monitor pollution in the capital, Kampala. They've been installed at strategic points in the capital, Kampala. The data collected will be used to develop more effective ways to fight air pollution.
We do have to worry about air quality in Uganda. We have so many activities that contribute to air pollution and worsen the quality of air in the country. We have so many old vehicles, too many two-stroke engine motorcycles. We do a lot of rubbish burning. We do use a lot of fossil fuels.
A recent study by the country's environmental watchdog showed a remarkable improvement in air quality during the lockdown. Before the lockdown, the air quality index fluctuated between 150 to 250, and during the lockdown, it was between 0 to 60. But with the easing of the lockdown, pollution levels are steadily rising.
Most of these vehicles are imported as second-hand cars. Ugandan scientists say they are partly to blame for compromising air quality here.
Environmentalists are now pushing for eco-friendly means of transport.
The use of sustainable means like electric vehicles, use of pool transport, use of healthy means like cycling, bicycling, walking, and also regular servicing of vehicles.
Uganda has already started manufacturing electric cars. Scientists believe this could be one of the solutions to curb respiratory problems in the country.
The lesser the number of cars which are old, the better for this place, because then the air is less contaminated. But also the industries that are coming up, I think they have to be monitored and investigated thoroughly if they can manage their wastes well, so that air pollution can decrease.
So far, there are no clear figures of how many people die from air pollution in Uganda. But health workers say it will take everyone's effort to have a city free from pollution. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
You're watching Africa Live. We're taking a short break. We'll be right back.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Our personalities are shaped by our experiences and social interactions. So how might the months of being isolated from friends, families and colleagues have altered us? Whichever way the lockdown played out, there has been one near universal aspect to the past months. It abruptly disrupted our daily routines and living arrangements in ways that would not normally occur. Here's Sumitra Naidu sharing her experience and if this will have any effect on her personality post-pandemic.
If I look back at this year, I have good and bad takeaways. It was not an easy year. As a journalist that's always out in the field or traveling to other provinces, other cities and other countries, being stuck at home was really, really difficult. I had to adapt. Working from home was a complete challenge. You have your family being a family. You can't just shoo them away. We had to share the space, manage our times. We did have loads of fun times. I don't think I've ever played that much Scrabble in my life before. It was time well spent, but if and when COVID leaves us, we will have so many scars to bear. So many died and so many died alone.
The fear of not knowing. In the past week, my 11-year-old had to be tested for COVID. He had all of the symptoms. It was a painful 24-hour wait. He tested negative, but he's still struggling to shake off the flu. I just have so much of gratitude for all of those in the front line, the nurses, the doctors, the paramedics that have worked so hard in helping us get through this pandemic.
My heart goes out to those that lost everything during this pandemic, family and wealth. I don't think we will ever forget how this virus ravaged us all in one way or another. It's a constant reminder of how quickly your fortune can change.
But we are resilient. I want to get back to doing everything that I did pre-COVID. Of course, we do it with a lot more thought. Life is precious, life is short, and we can't take any of that for granted.
Lockdowns and strict health regulations have led to changes in lifestyles for many. Here, CGTN's Adel Mahroui narrates how life has changed for him and his family in Egypt.
Before the pandemic, I was very cautious so as to avoid catching any contagious disease from people. However, I and members of my family still used to get sick several times a year. The COVID-19 pandemic was an eye-opener in that regard. I had to adjust the changes around me. Suddenly, I found myself almost physically isolated from the world around me as social distancing took effect and lockdowns were imposed. I no longer shake hands with people. I have to wear a face mask so as to reduce chances of infection. By using a face mask wherever I am, I try to, as much as possible, shield the air others breathe from entering my lungs. In the supermarket, I often wonder how many hands have touched the items that I am about to purchase. At home, we make sure that everything coming from outside the house gets disinfected, including me. I'm a field journalist, so I'm always meeting many different people. As a father, it's my duty to keep my family safe, and I therefore have to be extra careful about observing health and safety measures. I believe that due to these measures, which many around me brand as extreme, my family has barely gotten sick throughout the pandemic. We might have been luckier than others who got infected despite their best efforts, but implementing the measures has proven to be an effective experiment. I don't like the social restrictions that the pandemic has led to, but improving my personal hygiene and observing health measures are probably things I will stick to even after we win this war against the virus. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Coming up in sports, we take a look at some of the events that have been struck out of the 2020